Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings. How are you doing today? Our storm isn't actually as bad as we had expected it. It's starting to flare up a bit now. So today I have been spending my day with King George V, actually, and also a lot of people who are now dead, who would have been in their 80s and 90s in the 1970s when I was a child. And I've got links in the description if you're interested. I was fascinated and absolutely gripped. When I was little, I used to just look at people who were older than me and just think, well, you know, you're old. That's my gran, that's what they look like. I never really appreciated that they were children in Victorian days and teenagers. And I never really associated King George V with things like the Roaring Twenties. I'd always associated him a lot more with the First World War and lots of grim situations. And again, I'm going to put links. It comes in 4 parts. It's a documentary that's on YouTube called The First Windsors, because of course it was George and Mary who decided during the First World War, or the build up to it, that they didn't want to keep their German surname, and so they changed they don't actually have a surname, the royal family, but they decided they would adopt the name Windsors after Windsor Castle. Now, all my life I've always seen George and Mary as very stern, very stiff monarchs. That's how they've always been depicted, especially by a lot of royal correspondents and historians when they talk about them. They sort of make out that they were really, really uptight people. Now, having watched them on YouTube today, and in colour, there's some colour footage, they weren't at all. They were lovely. I can't find the YouTube link, but I remember watching a YouTube sometime earlier last year of George and Mary on tour somewhere, and I can't remember which country it was. And I think at that time they might have been the Prince and Princess of Wales. Anyway, George tripped down this ramp and Mary laughed at him, and he turned round and burst out laughing, and they were messing about, you know, like Princess Diana would have done, or like a lot of the modern royals do. And people forget, and I think I'm really into George V because of the waxwork dummy that I saw in the Tower of London. And he was quite a little guy, if that effigy is to be believed, because the dummy was on a platform a few inches high, and I was kind of eye level with it, and I'm 5'6", just under. And what an intense moment that was. His face, I mean, he really was a king. Really, I can't explain it. His eyes were piercing. The facial expression, just wonderful. And he was also the first one to do a Christmas speech on the radio. So he was quite cutting edge in his day. And I read that speech today. The transcripts are on the internet. And rather than get a copyright strike, because we all know what YouTube's like, I'll read it out to you. It's very short, very, very short. And it's very relevant in light of, for example, certain royals who don't believe in doing service. He says, "Through one of the miracles of modern science, I am enabled this Christmas day to speak to all my peoples throughout the empire. I take it as a good omen that wireless should have reached its present perfection at a time when the empire has been linked in closer union. For it offers us immense possibilities to make that union closer still." Imagine if he'd lived to see the internet. He goes on, "It may be that our future may lay upon us more than one stern test. Our past will have taught us how to meet it unshaken. For the present, the work to which we are all equally bound is to arrive at a reasoned tranquillity within our borders, to regain prosperity without self-seeking, and to carry with us those whom the burden of past years has disheartened and overborne. My life's aim has been to serve as I might, to Towards those ends, your loyalty, your confidence in me has been my abundant reward. I speak now from my home and from my heart to you all, to men and women so cut off by the snows, the desert or the sea, that only voices out of the air can reach them, to those cut off from fuller life by blindness, sickness or infirmity, and to those who are celebrating this day with their children and their grandchildren. To all, to each, I wish a happy Christmas. God bless you. Well, wow. In light of the fact that these days we have the internet, I mean, they only had radio then, and that he considered a marvel. He doesn't come across as a king who's lording it over an empire and slavery. He doesn't sound like a selfish man. He sounds like he's worrying, he's thinking about absolutely everybody, and he comes across that he's so honoured to have served as king. Couldn't some people learn some lessons from that, not to be quite so self-serving and selfish? Speaking of which, when I hear people complaining about only having 16 bathrooms and feeling a little neglected and desiring apologies, one of the links I'm going to put into the description of this video is a lady who was filmed in the 1970s in her high-rise bedsit. And she's just got a bed in one room, but she's got a bathroom, and she says, I can't understand people these days, why they complain. She says, I feel like I'm in Buckingham Palace. She even refers to the old Queen. Now, in the 1970s, I'm not quite sure which old Queen she's referring to, because obviously our Queen was quite young, and the Queen Mother was sprightly. But she says, when I was a girl, in Victorian days, we used a bucket to go to the toilet. She said, I've got a bathroom here now. She said, we were cold, we were hungry. And look where I am now, I'm warm. It might not be much, but I love it. How times have changed, and what a dramatic change that lady and others in the links to this video have saw in their lifetimes. Now, in my lifetime, things haven't changed quite that much. I remember being cold in the 70s because we generally didn't have central heating. We didn't even have fitted carpets at 86 High Street. My parents couldn't afford it, so they had a border and they'd say, well, let's call it a rug. But they basically couldn't afford fitted carpets. We didn't have a washing machine. To the day we moved out in 1990, we never had a washing machine. My mother went to the laundrette. It's not a massive hardship in comparison to Victorian days. Obviously, there was no internet, but we did have telephones. We didn't have mobile telephones. But as a society, as civilization, we're not doing badly. I know people are having to choose between heating and eating. But when you cast your mind back to Victorian days, and I've been watching documentaries all day long, and at the trenches and people freezing to death and dying in the trenches. Young people, younger than my kids, 17, 18 years old. It's just bloody awful. And then to me, it's a miracle of science that we have YouTube, that I can then see people who were alive when I was a child in the 70s, who I took for granted at the time. They were there. And I didn't realise. I mean, my gran was born in 1904, and my great aunt Nellie, who I adored, she would have been born in 1891. And I just never really looked at them like that, because I just knew them as they were in the time that I knew them. But it does seem to me that a lot of people take things for granted, and I would highly recommend the first Windsors of George and Mary. They're 4 YouTube videos, and each one is about 10 or 15 minutes long. And it does show another side to them as a couple. And also, boy, I really see our late Queen in Queen Mary's face, and also in her father's face, because I've been watching George VI as well, who of course had a stutter. But I watched a bit of the movie they did in 2010 called The King's Speech, and I think it was Colin Firth who played him, and they really laid on thick the stutter. So I thought, I'm going to actually go and watch George VI, and he wasn't stuttering that much. He was a pretty confident man, charismatic, Yes, he had to take a breath once in a while, but on the whole, he did a fabulous job. I hope Meghan and Harry, well, I don't care about Meghan. I hope Harry watches these videos. I'd urge you, look up George V. Look up George VI. Listen to the words they say and buck your ideas up. By anybody's standards, man, you're a multimillionaire with more toilets than you know what to do with. Anyway, that's my pen for today. In a previous video where I've done a similar subject, one of you lovely guys out there told me that when you were a child, you knew someone who was very, very old who was on the wagon wheels in America. Whoa! I mean, it's not actually that long ago when you think about it in relation, is it? And I love all your stories about people that you knew when you were much younger, when you were children, and the stories that they tell. And so I look forward, as always, to hearing all your stories and comments in the comments below. Thank you for listening.